132 hours, guys. Who knows how many temple runs? But we finally did it. We are done. If we look at our chapter guides here, if we go right to Invasion of Papnica Port, and we go to our characters, everybody is level 99. Everyone. And now we're going to go to the Temple of Recollection. And now we're going to notice that every character has every skill maxed to level 10. Every bond memory, including this one, that was no Kafriz, is now level 10. Everything is level 10. So I'm anticipating a question here. The Keeper of Memories comments on multiple things throughout the entire game. The rewards you get sometimes, the party members you go in, losing against certain bosses and he gives you tips, making it to the end of a dungeon or temple run, facing Dark King Vearn, going in with like Mam and going in with like Pop, etc, etc, etc. There are so many things the Keeper of Memory has said this entire game. So, the question is, if you complete everything, enhancing all the bond memories, enhancing the skills or spells, does he react to it? And the answer, I'm excited to report, is no. Square Enix, what are you doing? You had a guy that commented like 100 billion lines of dialogue, and you don't even have a comment about him rewarding you or praising you about maxing everything? I feel a bit cheated. But in any event, I want to help people understand and build around it. If anybody has a crazy brain like me that doesn't let them rest until they finish everything there is to do, you want to figure out what is the best build to try to maximize, to minimize, don't want to maximize it, minimize the amount of time you're spending for Temple Run. And your focus needs to be on Pop. If you are focusing on any other character, it's going to take a longer time to do. Pop, you will be in control of for your temple runs, probably about 99% of most of these particular temple runs that I do. And they take me on average about an hour and 20, at least they were before I maxed everything. An hour 20 minutes to do. Probably could have done it faster if I didn't go for certain doors, but in any event, let me show you my build, and then let me give you some tips or advice. Number one, if you are hunting Dark King Vearn, it's always the last door. So if you're like meticulously checking every single door, hoping like maybe he'll spawn here, maybe that'll be the spawn, only the last door matters. I still recommend checking boss doors not only for the rewards, but because on some of these later floors, the mob fights actually take longer than the bosses do. And so it generally is just better to do the boss fights anyway. But your build here, at least for Pop, and here's where I'm gonna have to justify myself, because this is gonna differ from a lot of people's builds. That was no Kafriz. For those of you who don't know, it not only does it increase your magic, but it has Fire Magic Essence. And what Fire Magic Essence does is it increases the amount of damage Frizz does, and it shortens its cooldown time, maxing out at 8.5 seconds. If you max out Frizz, which may take you a long time or very little, depending on your luck with getting the Frizz essences that drop, you can decrease the cooldown time of Frizz to 10. So it's not quite instant, even at level 10 for this, but it's going to be 1.5 seconds, which you can also adjust by holding L2 here on your PlayStation 5 controller to speed it up faster. But what is going to differ here are my choices for level 2 skills. I have his Indignation because of spell damage plus 30%, and I also have the Sword of Die, which is obviously for a character that's not Die, for spell damage plus 22%. And so several of you are wondering, Guard, the Dark King Vearn Shadow, The Spectral Dragon? Why don't you have that on Pop? And the answer to that question is, I want you guys to understand what your build is focusing on. Are you trying to cater your build towards the first 10 floors or the last 11 floors? And if the answer is the last 11 floors, which I suspect is probably going to be what your build is wanting to emphasize, you don't need this. And you don't need this. The reason you don't is because the first 10 floors or so, you're going to be killing enemies almost immediately. You're going to be one-shotting bosses the first couple of floors with Pop. You're not even going to need the Dark King Vearn Shadow or the Spectral Dragon that much. And for levels like 45 plus, at least for several stretches of levels, you're going to be gaining like 6 magic a level up. You're going to make up for the Spectral Dragon in no time on these later floors anyway. Meanwhile, the Sword of Dai and his Indignation have a buff, whatever your magic is. It's going to increase your spell damage by 30% and increase your spell damage by 22%. Across the last couple of dungeons, that means that when you're doing basically damage per second output with your Frizz, you're going to be dealing thousands more damage with this build than if you were to just have relied on Dark King Vearn Shadow and Spectral Dragon, which is maybe going to help you out a bit on some of these earlier dungeons. I also have Kilvern the Reaper, the Dragon's Blood, Pop spell damage plus 16%, and As Human Beings. As Human Beings is probably the one where people are like, why? And the reason, it's a stupid reason. You could change it for half the world, honestly, which is plus 66 magic. The reason I have it is I like to do a lot of no item runs, and every character has a way to increase their HP by normal attacks. We have Mam here, whose martial artist build revolves around that. Fame May Follow, the Refractor Fist Unveiled, all of them increase her HP with normal attacks. We have Hyunkel, whose ability here, Farewell to a Lonely Warrior, gives him HP Absorb plus 11 at max level. And then, of course, we have Dai, his final weapon has HP Absorb plus 11% too. The only character that cannot heal, and arguably should and needs the healing, cannot do it. The only way you can do it is As Human Beings, which has a 5% chance to trigger, and it can heal HP by 18 per second for 20 seconds. If you do the math, that's 360 HP healing. That's actually huge if you're doing a no item build and if you're doing a solo Pop no item build. Which, if it sounds ridiculous, crazy, and stupid, it is. I have done it. I do not recommend it. I do not recommend it. It's too RNG dependent. Although if you don't run into Dark King Vearn like me, it's probably more doable. And in any event, I recommend this build highly. What you want to prioritize for doors when you're going through the temple. Spell above everything else. Spell above attack, spell above the defense door, and spell above the skill door. Always try to prioritize magic and always try to buff Pop's magic. Magic crit rate, if you don't get a good magic roll for like the door itself, if you can go with the magic crit rate as well, that's fine, or magic crit damage if it's Pop specific. What I mean by Pop specific is these doors will roll either a lower increase for all characters or a higher increase for a very specific character. If you have a good like 1.5%, 2.5% for crit damage for Pop, you may want to consider it. The other thing that you want to look at is if you don't have a skill, or excuse me, if you don't have a spell door. If you have a skill door, you may want to try to go for that versus attack or defense, because honestly, it doesn't matter what any other character does damage-wise. All that matters is what Pop does. The only exception to that is Dark Armor Hyunkel, which is the only fight that is going to really be more reliant on other characters. Pop can hurt him with Donk. Pop can hurt him with Medroa maxed out, but really everybody else is going to have to be the one to be the star of the show there. You're gonna have to rely on Zap or Zapple with Die and just like the different coup de grace with everybody else. But above and all foremost, I choose the skill sometimes because A, it could shorten Frizz, and B, it could increase Frizz's damage output by like various percentages. Usually 1, if you go through a boss door, sometimes 2% some of these earlier floors. Later floors it can get more ridiculous, like 6%, and towards the end 10%. Which we're talking at that particular point, it's a 3,000 extra damage. So I recommend that build for Pop. I think that's going to help things smooth out quite a bit more. Everybody else's build is not as important as Pop's, but you want to try to do that. You want to prioritize magic, prioritize skills, and maybe, hopefully, cross your fingers, get a Frizz increase. Unfortunately, you can't unequip skills and only have like one, because the problem is you can't control whether it's going to increase coup de grace, fill rate, coup de grace damage, skill speed as far as cooldown time, or damage output. And so if you could mitigate the number of skills to force it to increase Frizz, that'd be amazing, but you can't, at least at this particular point in time. You can't unequip it and have only one skill. So, thank you all for watching. I'm very, I guess, proud of myself in a strange way. I'm more happy that I don't have to play this game anymore. I'm tired of investing time and trying to find Dark King Vearn. But thank you all for stopping by. If you have any questions about temple running, builds, anything else, message me in the comments. Thank you and have a wonderful day.